Thank you very much, General. I was going to start with a question of Assistant Secretary Glazer. And Ambassador Kim made the point that increasingly Russia has stepped in where China has curtailed with respect to support for North Korea. I think he's speaking about the issue of forgiving debt and certainly the investments from Russia into the rail network. I've traveled in North Korea, and the functioning rail network just ends at the border. And once you're in North Korea, it's not operational, so, or at least none that I could see. And so the investment would seem to be critical coming from Russia. The question I have is that investment that would then be sanctionable, right, under the interpretation that I just read. And on top of that, if we look at the Section 311 sanctions, which you were at the center of in 2005, I remember working with you on that at the time, with respect to Banco Delta Asia, there's a lot more that we could be doing here if we were to label North Korea a primary money laundering concern, as we've done with Iran. That would be possible. After all, we caught them, you know, with $100 U.S. currency. We saw that in Macau. We had $100 bills there that were counterfeited out of North Korea. So the question I have then is let's go to that issue of financial sanctions on North Korea. As Kurt Campbell, former top State Department official for Asia, noted recently, we could really move effectively with that and make life much more difficult for those who are making life difficult in South Korea and here.
Well, thank you for the question, Chairman Royce. I certainly agree with you. It is our goal, and it has been our strategy. It's been our strategy at the Treasury Department for many years now to implement sanctions and other financial measures in a way that isolates North Korea from the international financial system. And that would be from the international financial system everywhere, whether it's China or Russia or the United States or Europe or other places in Asia. The goal is to squeeze them financially as much as possible. With respect to the new executive order that you make reference to and that I discussed in my testimony, that's an important new tool that we have at our disposal, precisely because it gives us a tremendous amount of flexibility in how we approach targeting. So we could target any North Korean government agency, we could target any North Korean government official, and then once so targeted, we could apply sanctions with respect to any individual or entity who's providing them in turn material support, or any individual entity that they in turn control. So that gives us a large degree.
And I think that's where we need to have the focus, because the Foreign Trade Bank, that was a designation a long time coming, but just designating North Korean institutions is not going to curtail the kind of hard currency that the regime uses in order to continue to expand their ICBM program, for example.
Right, and that's why what we're trying to do is identify what their nodes are into the international financial system. You mentioned Banco Delta Asia, a designation under 311 that we did 10 years ago. Why that was so successful was not with respect to the specific action on Banco Delta Asia, but that tied up about $25 million of money that North Korea said was North Korean money. But the real impact of Banco Delta Asia and that designation and that action was that it created a chilling effect throughout the financial system. Banks around the world stopped doing business with North Korea. We still live in that world today. It's that action and a lot of other actions we've taken have made it a lot harder.
And that's why Mr. Engel and I have our legislation that we have over in the Senate, because my observation at the time was that, as you said, it wasn't just Banco Delta Asia, it was a dozen banks, all that were willingly doing business in laundering, basically, or doing business with North Korea. And once those accounts were frozen, not only could he not pay his generals, but I later talked to defectors who had worked on the missile program. He said that program came to a halt because we did not have the hard currency. We couldn't even buy the clandestine gyroscopes that we would buy on the black market for those missiles. We couldn't pay for anything. And that's the kind of pressure I think could cause a regime to recalibrate its thinking. There has to be consequences directly, and it has to impact, the family itself that run that country. And the best way I can think of doing that is to not give them the hard currency so that those generals are not paid, the Army is not paid, and at some point people turn and say there has to be a better way forward than the kind of repression that's going on. And that's why we're trying to jumpstart this beyond just sanctions within North Korea to the financial sanctions that would truly create additional pressure. Do you think our legislation, which we had passed into the Senate last year, if we get that out of the Senate this year, do you think that would be a useful tool?
Well, you say, Chairman, that it was dozens of banks. It was more than dozens of banks. It was hundreds of banks making the decision at the time to not do business with North Korea. So we had that impact, and that's an impact that we're still that's a world that we're still living in. So again, you say the goal is to identify financial institutions outside of of North Korea that provide these points of access, and that's exactly what we're trying to do. You mentioned, Chairman, Foreign Trade Bank. I thought that was an extremely significant action. That was North Korea's primary source of access to the international financial system. And
true enough, but I would just point out there's a number of small banks that we've been following. They're doing business with North Korea that, frankly, if we really wanted to squeeze, we could cut that off. And if we do cut that off, it becomes very problematic for them to get the resources, even to send these hackers, to Moscow. Or in the past, they sent them to Beijing to get the kind of training. I mean, if you cut off the hard currency, these regimes, like North Korea, cannot carry out the kinds of offensive attacks that they're given to.
Right, and that's exactly what we're trying to do. A Foreign Trade Bank, Daedong Credit Bank, Daesung Bank, Bank of Eastland. These are banks that we have targeted with sanctions. We use Section 311 on Bank of Delta Asia. The actions that we've taken have caused a chilling effect, even within the Chinese financial system. Even banks, major commercial banks within China, have cut off their relationships with entities such as Foreign Trade Bank. So I think, Chairman, that's exactly the right approach that we should be taking.
We're on the right road. We just want to accelerate it. Dan, thanks for being here to testify today.
Thank you.
We go now to Mr. Engel.